Hello and welcome to the topic fractions, decimals, and percentages. So let's get started. First, let's talk about fractions. Fractions represent a part of a whole. They are represented with a slash sign in between the two numbers, such as a slash b, read as a over b or a by b is a fraction. 2 by 4, 3 by 2, and 2 whole 1 upon 2 is an example. There are two key components in a fraction. The first is called the numerator. It is the value above or before the slash sign. The second one is the denominator. It is the value below or after the slash sign. In this example of 1 over 2, 1 is the numerator and 2 is the denominator. Fractions are not always only written as with a slash. They can be written on top and bottom as well. So there are three main types of writing fractions. First one is proper fractions. Proper fractions are fractions where numerator is less than the denominator. The representation is as it was. For example, 2 over 4, 1 over 2, and 5 over 7 are examples of proper fraction. Next, we have improper fractions. Improper fractions are fractions where the numerator is greater than the denominator. The representation is same, but the numerator value would be bigger than the denominator value, such as 3 over 2, 10 over 7, or 17 over 4 are an example of improper fractions. And lastly, we have mixed numbers. Mixed numbers are whole numbers plus a proper fraction. Improper fractions can be converted into mixed numbers and vice versa. What we mean here is that improper fractions can be written as mixed numbers. And how we do that, we will look at later. They are represented as A, B over C, where A is the whole number and B over C is the proper fraction. An example could be 2 whole 2 upon 3, 3 whole 1 upon 2, or 6 whole 3 upon 4. Let's take a look at this example. Fractions are used to signify parts of a whole. For example, we have this circle that we have divided into 8 equal parts. Then we could say that 1 over 8 of these parts of a circle are colored purple. Or we could say that 1 by 8 or 1 out of total 8 parts of this circle are colored. The rest are simply just white. Next, we have simplifying fractions. Fractions can be simplified. It means we are finding the simplest form of a fraction. The procedure is we divide both the numerator and denominator by their highest common factor. We studied how to find highest common factor in topic 1.1, where we were studying the types of numbers. An example can be 12 over 18 can be simplified by dividing both the numerator and denominator by their highest common factor. For example, in this case, their highest common factor of 12 and 18 are 6. So we get 2 over 3, as 6 times 2 is 12 and 6 times 3 is 18. Similarly, 18 over 12 can be simplified to 3 over 2 using the same highest common factor. 18 over 12 in this case is simplified to 3 over 2 using the same highest common factor. If you notice in this case, 3 over 2 is an improper fraction, and as we said earlier, improper fractions can be converted into whole numbers or mixed numbers, and the way to do that is simple. Here we have converted 3 over 2 into its mixed number form. And the way to do it is we divide the numerator by the denominator. Or in simple words, the numerator becomes the dividend and the denominator is the divisor. So we divide 3 by 2 and we get quotient, that is 1 in this case, and the remainder, that is also 1, written in blue in this case. So the quotient becomes the whole number and the remainder becomes the numerator of the proper fraction part of mixed number. In this case, 3 over 2 can also be written as 1 whole 1 upon 2. Decimals are another way of representing parts of a whole. We use a decimal point to separate whole numbers from parts. An example is 1.15, 1.5, and 2.35. Decimal and fractions are usually interconvertible, which means that fractions can be written in forms of decimals and decimals can be written in forms of fractions. However, in some cases, not all decimal values can be converted into fractions. For example, the value of pi, that is 3.14159, and this value continues almost forever, cannot be written completely in its fractional form. Fractions are mostly writable in their decimal point form. In this case, 0.5 could also be written as 1 over 2 in fractions. 1.5 can be written as 3 over 2 in fractional form, and 0.7 can be written as 7 over 10. How we find decimal values from the fractions is something like this. We again put the denominator outside, that is, it becomes the divisor, and the numerator inside, that is, it becomes the dividend. And then we simply start the dividing process. Since 2 cannot completely divide 1, we put a 0 and then we put a point. And this point makes allows us to put a 0 inside and next to the divisor. So it makes our value that is to be divided 10. And then we know that 2 multiplied by 5 is 10. And that gives us the remainder 0. So 0.5. So when 1 is divided by 2, it becomes 0.5. Similarly, if we are to divide 3 by 2, what we get is first value is 1. We get 2 times 1 is 2. And we get a remainder 1. Then we put a point to get a 0 next to the 1 that we got as a remainder. And then we put a 5 to get 10. And finally, our remainder is 0. Next up, we have the concept of recurring decimals. Sometimes a decimal value has no finite endpoint and they become repeated values, which is what we call recurring. So we write them as recurring. We use a dot or a bar above the repeating digit. For example, there are 3 examples given here. 0.17 dot would mean that the value is 0.1777777, and this 7 are recurring. They just keep on coming forever and forever. So we put a dot above 7 to show the recurring nature of 7. Similarly, 0.123 and a dot above 23 means that these two digits are recurring. So our value would be something like 0.123232323, and this value would continue forever and forever. Similarly, rather than putting a dot, we can put a line above it. In this example, we have 0.123 and there is a line above 123. It would mean that we can write 0.123, 123, 123, 123, 123, and that is the value that we are getting. That is the decimal point value. So it is a recurring decimal. Next up, we have the concept of percentages. Percentages expresses a fraction out of 100. In simple words, we can say the denominator is 100, or we are talking about parts out of 100. It is represented with the percentage symbol. A% would mean A over 100. For example, 50% would mean 50 over 100. We can also write it as 1 over 2 or 0.5. 75% is 75 over 100, also written as 3 over 4 or 0.75. And 12% would mean 12 over 100, that can be written as 0.12. Now let's do some practice. First up, we have a few questions here. First one is converting decimals to fractions. Then we have converting fractions to decimal. Then we have converting fractions to percentages. And we have converting percentages to fractions. And then we have write 8 over 10 in its simplest form. We also studied how to write simplest form in the earlier part of this lecture. So let's get started. First, let's put it to the side and talk about the first one. We are converting the decimal to fraction 0.125. 0.125 has a decimal followed by 3 digits, which means there is a point, and after point we have 3 digits, that is 1, 2 and 5. So we can convert directly into a fraction with a denominator of 10 with power of number of digits followed by a decimal. What this means is that the number of digits that we have after the decimal can become the denominator, and the values of that follow after the point becomes the numerator. So it becomes something like 125 over 1000. And 125 over 1000 can be simplified as 5 times 25 is 125 and 5 times 200 is 1000. So we have a little simplified version, but it can be further simplified. 25 times 1 and 200 by 25 is 8. So 0.125 can be simplified to its form of 1 over 8, and that becomes the answer. Next up, we have converting fractions to decimal. We have 7 over 8. Or how we do it is we simply put the numerator as the dividend and denominator as the divisor, 7 divided by 8. And we put a 0 and then we put a point to get 70. And then 8 times 8 is 64. That gives us the remainder of 6. So we put another 0 and follow along with the basic division. So 60, and then we have 8 sevens are 56. That gives us 4. And then finally we put another 0 and we do the division and we finally get 0.875. So 0.875 is our final answer. And that is what we are going to put as the answer to our second question. Next up, we have converting fractions to percentages, 3 over 9. First, since we can simplify it, we are going to simplify it as 1 over 3. As 3 times 1 is 3 and 3 times 3 is 9. And since we are talking about percentages, we are going from fractions to percentages. We already have a fraction and now we are going to percentage. So we are going to multiply by 100. That is, it becomes 100 divided by 3 and it becomes 33.33, and we put a recurring sign percent. So it becomes 33.33 recurring percent. Next up, we are converting percentages to fraction. We have 20%, and 20% can simply be written as 20 over 100 because we are talking about percentages to fraction, and now we can simplify it. 20 times 1 is 20 and 20 times 5 is 100. So it becomes 1 over 5. And that is our answer to this question. And finally, we have to write 8 over 10 in its simplest form, and that is very basic. We can simply divide everything by 2, and we get 4 and 5, 4 in the numerator and 5 in the denominator, and its simplest form becomes 4 over 5. And so we write it down. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. If you have any questions, you can ask in the comments. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I will look forward to answering any questions you might have. Until the next video, thank you for watching. Have a nice day.